Hello, everyone. This is Tommy at World at War Comics again, and we have another amazing guest. This time we have Fabrizio Aiello. He is the writer, creator, artist, letterer. He does it all for his comic book. This is Horus Hoover from Alterna Comics. They are currently on issue 2, about to release issue 3. Amazing comic book. The art is next level in detail. Really enjoyed the first 2 issues, and I can't wait for you to meet Fabrizio. Amazing artist, amazing talent, and can't wait for him to continue on Horus Hoover and see what else he has up his sleeve in the near future. So sit back, enjoy, make sure you subscribe, and hit that notification bell so you know when we drop new interviews. Without further ado, here is Fabrizio and I. Thank you, everyone. Well, hello, everyone. Welcome to the show. Today, we have an amazing guest, Fabrizio Aiello. Fabrizio, thank you so much for joining us. Man, I really enjoyed your current comic book, which I have right here, if nobody's ever seen it, from Alterna Comics. Yeah, Horus Hoover. I had a blast with it. It's the story is incredible. There's a few fight scenes. There's kind of a who did it kind of aspect to it. The art is incredible, and there's comedy too. I found myself kind of giggling through it. So, man, we certainly want to get into that. But Fabrizio, I would love to understand where this passion for comics started with you.
Sure. Well, thanks for having me. I really appreciate it.
Absolutely.
Yeah, my background for comics is a little circuitous. I mean, I grew up reading comics. I sort of had them around the house before I could start reading. My older brothers collected them. So I don't know, 5 or 6, I was looking at, comics. As soon as I could scrounge together 65 cents and get on my bike, I was collecting at that point, and I took that to a whole other level.
Yeah.
And it kind of coincides with drawing. I feel like for a lot of artists, you need that one thing to get you into it. And for me, it was comic books and comic strips at the time. So I started drawing, anything I could get my hands on. I ruined quite a few comic books using silly putty.
I love it. Hey, just so you know, Fabrizio, you're aging yourself with 65-cent comics and silly putty.
I know.
I know exactly what you're talking about, but
I mean, we had a newsstand. I didn't have a comic book shop either, exactly. So that was a whole other thing too. Yeah, so I started drawing comics I got into art in general, but my primary source was comic books. And then as I got a little older, I really got more into illustration type stuff. So more like fantasy, like horror. I was really into like detailed pen and ink drawings, black and white type stuff, fantasy stuff. So I collected comics, but it seemed too hard for some reason. Like I could sit there and do an illustration for 40 hours, but the idea of taking a character and turning them in space and doing panels, for some reason, it's not something I could wrap my head around. And this was before YouTube, where where you had somebody to tell you, like, walk you through it. So, but I could definitely do an illustration. So I did that a lot. I ended up going to school for fine arts. And when I was in school, it's primarily like nude study, charcoal drawings, portraits, things like that. Mm-hmm. So I got pretty far away from comics at that point, as far as drawing. I was still reading them and collecting them, of course. And then when I graduated, I had an old friend of mine come over and he said, "Hey, I wrote a short story for a comic. Would you like to draw it?" And I'm like, "Yeah, why not? I just spent 4 or 5 years in art school. Surely I can whip that thing out and with no problem at all, right?"
Yeah.
Yeah, right. So I'm like, this is just as hard as I remember it being, even with all of the schooling,
Yeah.
So that was probably like what I call sort of the second age in image stuff. So like the Michael Turner, like Witchblade era,
Oh yeah.
So I did I think it was like 6 or 8 page short story. It was okay. I got through it. But it was just as difficult as I imagined it being. Although that did kind of get me back into the idea that I could potentially draw. but it was still on the back burner. So fast forward maybe 10 years, and I had another friend of mine come up. Hey, I wrote a short story. I'm like, sure, I'll give it another crack at it. Another 6, 8 page short story. And I finished it. It worked out okay. I could definitely see all of my faults. And for me, like my art had to reach a certain level before I felt confident to put it out there. And I don't know if that's the right way to go about it. It probably isn't,
Yeah.
but that's the kind of mindset I had. Then we fast forward even a little more. I was into 3D modeling,
Mhm.
and I sculpted a character, a Horus Hoover character, based on a sketch of mine. And people really reacted to the 3D model.
Oh, wow.
And that really got me thinking. I'm like, oh, maybe this isn't just like a goofy little thing that I'm doing,
Yeah.
maybe it's something that I can actually, again, put out into the world. Spent a year doing like the first issue, really kind of feeling out the style, the coloring, the lettering, because I'm doing everything on it. And after I got the first issue done, then I sent it to Alterna. It got picked up, and it's been a couple of years now. So just finished up issue 3 and heading into issue 4.
Nice. So where did this character come from? I mean, it's very unique. I've never seen anything like that before. I mean, his helmet that allows him to see things that other people can't see. His understanding. He's definitely a detective, I think, by nature, right? But he has a unique way of going about it. He has a couple, I don't know if you would call them sidekicks, but he has a couple friends that seem to be part of his clique as he's trying to work through things.
Yeah.
Like, where did Horace come from? Like, how did you come up with the helmet? I mean, it's so unique. It's amazing. I love it.
Sometimes I actually forget that it's a vacuum cleaner.
Is that what it came? Is that what, like, you were looking at a vacuum cleaner like that would be an awesome helmet type thing?
I wish that was a story, but unfortunately it's not. No, I was doing these really big, like caricature drawings, like really detailed graphite drawings. And I would start with an interesting shape, really like loose, right? And I had done like a big oval and a square. And I sat down and I just kind of did a rectangle to start with
Yeah.
on top of a shoulder, a real big rectangle. And then I put the ear really high up. And then I'm like, that's funny. It kind of looks like a vacuum cleaner. And I put another wheel, and I'm like, oh, those look like wheels. And then I drew and I just sat there, and I'm like, that's kind of funny.
Yeah.
And it just kind of made me chuckle.
Yeah.
And then I set it aside. And the thing is, I was working on some other illustration stuff, but I found myself constantly like sketching him, like in the corner of a page or during a meeting at work, I'm
Yeah.
drawing, Horace H. Hoover. And then I just kept picturing scenes.
Yeah.
And I'm like, I really should do something with this. I would like sketch out the scene and I'd put it on my wall. And then honestly, after like, I don't know, 6 or 8 months, my walls were just covered in these like sketches. It looked like the third act in the serial killer movie where they find his lair and it's just got these like cutouts and everything.
You didn't have
Like
strings going from each one, did you?
exactly, like it with a bullseye or something on it.
Exactly.
So then I had all of these scenes. I'm like, I really need to do something with this.
Yeah.
And I'm like, okay, at this point, again, I'm trying to figure out what does it look like?
Yeah.
Is it going to be like more detailed? Is it going to be looser? Is it going to be
Mhm.
modern or retro? And to me, I'm a Bronze Age person, and I always gravitate towards 80s sort of comic
Yeah.
books. So I'm like, well, I definitely want to. I'm aiming for that. So I did 7, essentially they're like fake images for
Okay.
pages, you
Hmm.
know, and I would go through the whole process of drawing, inking, writing, doing the dialogue, and I posted them on Instagram just to like figure out what does Horace even sound like.
Yeah.
So I would do these 7 pages. If I can do these 7 pages, then maybe I'll do a short story and a 10-page short story. If I can do a 10-page short story, then I can do a 16-page story. So
Yeah.
it's sort of, I went from there. But it was by accident.
Well, since you mentioned vacuum cleaner, does that have anything to do with his last name being Hoover then?
It does, yes. Yeah,
Yeah, kind
yeah,
of a little
yeah.
play on.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, I
We
love it. I love
will
it.
we will get to his origin story on in the ongoing series.
Okay.
And that's one of those scenes like from the very beginning that I had in my head very clearly. But I'm
Yeah.
like, I don't want to do it too early. I really want to build up to it, like
Yeah.
to get to that.
Will we ever see what he looks like or no?
We won't. I don't think. Like in my
Yeah.
head, we'll never see his face.
Yeah.
He does. There will be like
I
a
don't want you to have
point.
to give anything away,
No,
by
I
the
know.
way.
I know. But
Yeah.
I do have something in mind where there will be potentially like a conflict where does he keep it on or take it off? But I don't think we'll actually see what's underneath.
Yeah, yeah. So he's definitely a Mandalorian, it sounds like. The helmet cannot
Yeah,
come off, right? Yeah.
yeah. I think it would ruin something.
Yeah, no, I think having that kind of mystique about him is really cool, and I think it just draws out more of the story of who is this guy, where did he come from, and why does he have this special skill set that is very unique, and then the timing that it takes place right in the 20s, even the environment around him is really cool. So I love it. You had a scene, I don't know if it was issue 1 or 2, and actually it was in a couple both issues, I believe, where he's standing there and the detail on his mask of what he was looking at, right? Because we're seeing him, but we don't know what he's looking at. And you did, like, when I tell you the detail was incredible, I saw on his face what he was looking at. And it was just the other side of the bedroom, but there was detail in what the side of,
Oh,
when he's talking to the young girl, it's issue 1.
yes.
And he's in the
Yeah.
bedroom and she's explaining what's going on and he's looking around. That was incredible. So like, that is like next level detail, my friend.
Thank you. His mask and the glass was actually it took some time to figure that out because
Yeah.
I'm like, well, I can't do detailed reflections for every shot because
Right. Yeah.
that's impossible. And I don't want it to look like Rorschach where
Yeah.
it almost is like alive. I didn't want to do that. So I'm trying to really like play the like when I really want to show the reflection, then I do
Yeah.
because it means something or there's a
Exactly.
reason for it. So
You're right. Yeah. No, it was beautiful. I mean, it was
thank you.
incredible. I enjoyed that a lot. I always look for those little things. I'm like, wow, that's like incredible detail.
Yeah, each issue so far has really sort of upped the detail and upped like I mean, unfortunately, it's taken longer to do each issue.
Yeah. By the time we get to issue like 4, it'll be 2028, my friend, if you do that.
Yeah, I know. I know. I mean, I'm playing around with some
Yeah.
things as far as style. So
Yeah.
I'm kind of I'm letting it breathe, which I think for especially for a mini series,
Hmm.
before I get into the ongoing, I'm kind
Right.
of playing around with pacing and colors and all of these things that, will be solid by issue 1 of the ongoing. But
Nice. Nah, it's awesome. We were talking a little bit before we started recording. The detail work in issue 1 and 2 reminded me a little bit of the artist Jorge Jimenez, which you and I talked is like at the top of his game, right? When it comes to artists and comic book. And I think that one of the reasons why he is so popular is because when you do read Batman or Catwoman, the detail that he's able to do is just incredible. And when I read issue 1 and 2, I had that same feeling of detail in your art. I mean, it's very good. You're really good.
wow.
The story was good, but like I get to meet a lot of artists and everyone has a style and they're all amazing in their own, but when I could look at it and then it reminds me of another artist that's that top tier, I have to tell you, Fabrizio, I was so impressed by your art.
Wow. That's high
Not that I didn't
praise.
enjoy the story, because the story was incredible too, but man, the art is next level, my friend.
Thank you. I mean that is really high praise. I mean I spent a lot of time sort of doing a deep dive in every aspect before
Hmm.
I dipped my toe in the water. And whether it's anatomy and perspective and all of that stuff, I maybe went overboard a little bit,
No, not at all. Not
Um
at all. It's a treat, to be quite honest, to be able to see that kind of art.
yeah, backgrounds I find are still kind of rare in
Yeah.
comics. And I try to like there's a few like if you have an action scene, you usually don't want to have a lot of background because that
Yeah.
actually clutters it up. but there's definitely times where a background is needed. And whenever I think, well, can I skimp on the background? And every time I'm like, darn it, I can't.
Nope.
I got to
I
draw
don't
those
think so.
1,000 books.
I mean, they're speaking of detail, right? They're in issue 2, and we don't want to give too much away because people need to get out there and purchase this comic book. But there is a scene where he goes to the library, and the detail, to your point, the background as he walks into that one portion of the library on the 3rd floor, incredible detail work. I mean, I want to, it's almost like Where's Waldo? I want to go back and see different things that I might have missed because there is a lot of detail in it. And to your point, I mean, the detail obviously should change panel by panel depending on where you want the reader to focus. But man, I just looking at this, which I assume came with maybe a Kickstarter or something. I don't know what that character's name is at the bottom that was part of the library because I don't think it said his name. Am I correct?
It should have said it. I think the very last page or
Oh,
second to
maybe
last
I
page.
missed it. I apologize,
No,
but
it's okay.
he's
It's
incredible. The detail on that guy. I felt like I could almost read one of those books hanging off of him.
Thank you. Yeah, that's the book bug. And
Oh, the book. Okay, I'm sorry.
the book bug, yeah. So as far as the detail, the thing I really try to do, I add as many Easter eggs as humanly possible. Now, I also do a mix of real and sort of fake, So if I'm doing a language on a scroll or something, it's really 50-50. That could be from some like old occult book I have, or like something I find online. Some of those books, like there's a specific book that the book bug uses is a real book.
No way.
Yeah, so
now I gotta go back, man.
So if you look at that design, and the funny thing is I have to make sure I write this stuff down because sometimes I forget. I'm like, oh, that's right. I put that little detail here.
Yeah.
So I love Easter eggs as a reader, so I try to do that as much as possible.
Now I have to go back and look for everything. I think it is fun, right? It brings another element to the story that I don't think most comic books provide. So that's enjoyable. What about slurp? Is that language also something real, or is that made up? Do I need to research this?
He is speaking. So there's a particular font, and if you figure out the font, you could translate what Slurp is saying.
Man, you're gonna make us work for all this. I love it.
I had considered maybe someday to do like an augmented reality app.
Yeah,
that will just translate Slurp's language.
That would be awesome.
Almost like a decoder ring or something. I thought that would be a lot of fun. So
yeah, I remember growing up, there were like some of those where it came with like a little eyeglass thing, and it was like a green color, and you put it over, and you could see what the words really meant.
Yeah,
that would be a lot of fun. That's old school too. That's 80s right there.
I know. We'll see if I can fit that in sometime.
Yeah. So as far as the story, right? Did Horus Hoover come first, or did you have this story and you created Hoover to enter into that story and be the main character? What came first for you?
It was definitely the character. But the character sort of appeared almost like whole cloth. It's hard to explain it.
Yeah.
Once I did the first drawing of Horus where he sort of leaned back with his hand on his hip, like his character kind of emerged. And from the character, all of a sudden, these scenes popped up. So it was definitely the character first, and then the story around it. But it really, and it sounds trite and cliche, it kind of wrote itself,
Sure.
But sometimes when you have one thing that is really easy, and everything else becomes easier because of it, and then I could tie these scenes together, once I have the character. As far as his story, just to kind of talk about his origins and stuff, the miniseries really is sort of just kind of lays the groundwork. I wanted to get people used to the world, used to him as a character, his language, how he speaks in his very like Horus kind of way. I introduced Max and Slurp.
Yeah.
And I want to introduce that first in the miniseries because I think it would have been a little too much if I just threw a bunch of weird stuff in issue 1. Like, so that was the whole idea. But as far as his story, there's the miniseries chunk, and then there's the ongoing. And I think I have something like 6 or 12 issue arc
Oh,
kind
wow.
of planned out for him. And it
Okay.
definitely it expands, it gets pretty big,
Yeah.
but I don't think overly complex.
So we'll start with a 4-part mini series, and then after the 4-part mini series, we'll go into like a 6 or a larger series.
It's a 5 issue miniseries.
Oh, it's a 5. I'm sorry, 5 issue
Yep.
mini series.
It's a
Yep.
5 issue miniseries. And then it's ongoing, but there'll be arcs, but it won't be numbered. So,
Gotcha. Yeah.
in my head, I'm thinking, roughly 4 to 6 issues for like one arc, and then another
Yeah.
6 issues after that.
That's awesome, man. So cool. So why was the 1920s the period that you chose for Horace? Why is that important to the story?
I I mean, I love New York sort of at a different times,
Yeah.
but the 20s, I mean, man, there's that whole sort of mystic era. There's tarot cards and
Yeah.
seances and Houdini and Aleister Crowley. It's just a really great time
For
period.
sure. Yeah.
Like the machinery, not that Horace H. Hoover is steampunk per se, but there
Right.
is, like, he does make some gadgets, and there is like
Uh-huh.
that sort of aspect to it. So there's a lot
Sure.
of interesting stuff going on at that time in New York that I can leverage.
Mm.
It's just a cool time period. I love the outfits, I love the costumes, and it just, anytime I thought of him, especially with the language,
Yeah.
it seemed to fit there more than anywhere else, even though
Right.
it still even might be a little out of place there,
Yeah.
but
Yeah. It seemed
even
to
for
fit.
yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and you got like gangster era
Yeah.
and like prohibition roughly around there. I mean, there's a lot of things you can play with,
That's true. Yeah.
in New York, let alone the pocket universes that he'll be traveling to and all of the other paranormal stuff.
Yeah. So cool. So we got just a quick mention of his wife in issue
Yes,
one. Will she play any role down the road, or was that just the issue one type thing?
she will.
Okay.
Yeah, in issue 3 we see her.
Oh,
So
okay.
she has a part in issue 3. She is important to the story, like overall theme. And I don't, I don't want to say this story is about Horace and his wife,
Right.
but there is like some heart to the story,
Mhm.
and there will be certain points where she comes into play, and their relationship
Mhm.
and how that plays out is going to be important to the story. Because I don't want people to think it's just kind of goofy, weird Horace. There's going to be some serious stuff for
Yeah.
sure. But it's still with Horace. So even if the scenario might be serious, it's still going to have his attitude in it.
Yeah.
But yeah, I'm excited to get to her part and their interaction, because that'll be kind of a way for the reader to see how everybody else views Horus. So we
Mm.
can see how, if he goes to a strange land, how they react to him. We can see Max and Slurp, they know him. But as far as just a normal, regular person, how would
Hmm.
they react to somebody who wears a vacuum cleaner on their head?
Yeah.
So, yeah.
That's so funny, man. I can't stop thinking about that. And the naming the Hoover, I love it. I love it. So as far as writing, you you do the penciling, you do the lettering, you do the coloring, I assume too. The colors are you
Yeah,
too.
everything.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, you're kind of doing it all. I guess you did have a little bit of experience on two different occasions that you mentioned earlier in our conversation where you were doing art on behalf of someone else's story. So although it might not have been a long run, you still have that experience. Out of the two, which do you have enough experience, do you think, to be able to define whether one is harder than the other, like working for someone else's story and then having to create panels that align with their story? Or is it much easier for you to do it all that way, the panel is going to align with the, like, I have an idea, but I have never done both, right?
Yeah. I, I think it comes down to like a vision. And
Mm-hmm.
if you have a clear vision of what the ultimate goal is,
Yeah.
then it's far easier to do everything. Because what I can do is I can look at every panel and say, okay, in this particular panel, the dialogue is actually more important. Well, no, actually the facial expression is more important.
Yeah.
Sometimes the color, and I use color in a really specific way, is actually is important. You can tell story with color.
Yeah.
So having all of those tools at my disposal, I can really pop forward with nuance, wherever I need to. So to me, I think it would be pretty difficult to draw and have somebody else write it. I'm not saying it's impossible, but man, our visions would really have to align. I think for the foreseeable future, I will do everything that I can. I think, and including the lettering. At first, I said, okay, that's the one thing that I can give to somebody else, right? I don't need to do the lettering. But then I got into it, and I'm like, I'm changing the dialogue while I'm doing the lettering. Sometimes it's that it gets down to the wire sometimes on that. So I'm like, you know what? I can't even hand that over, which is tough. I'm not gonna lie, it's a lot of work for one person, but
Sure.
as long as I can produce it, then I'm okay doing the work.
Yeah. So on average, if you were going to do a page, are you laying out the art first and then going back and then adding the lettering, or are you doing a page, doing the lettering, like you're done with that page and you move on to the next one?
So I start, as far as the writing, I will start with the outline,
Yeah.
and then I will do a first draft, including dialogue. And this is absolutely going to get trashed but you just get the first draft out, have it aligned to the outline. And then from there, I can start to do the thumbnails and figure out how many pages, what kind of scenes do I need to go back and revise. I do all of the pencils first. Then I go back and do all of the inks, all of the colors, and then I do all the letters.
Gotcha. Yeah.
So I do it in layers. I've considered maybe changing that up for issue 5, but we'll see. This seems to be working well. But I mean, I think being aware of your process is just as important as the process.
Yeah, I would think so. Yeah.
So I'm constantly like observing what I'm doing, what's working, what's not. Can I save time? Is this, so I have nothing against switching things up if I think it'll potentially help. But currently, that's how I'm doing it.
Yeah. Man, it seems like a lot of work. How long is one issue take then?
I had estimated somewhere between like 3 and 4 months originally, but that was issue 1, which is a little more, it doesn't have as much detail. I'll use issue 3 as an example. Issue 3, I started to experiment with pacing a bit more. So I have, I think, 3 splash pages, but I also have some pages with 12 panels on them.
Oh, wow.
So I'm trying to really experiment with that. So that actually is taking a bit more time. Like I said, I'm letting enough time for experimentation going into each issue. But if I had to say 3 to 5 months right now, I think I could shave that down if I went for a simpler style, but I'm not ready to do that just yet.
Yeah, I mean, what I've seen the first 2 issues, I wouldn't change a thing, to be honest. But I know it's a lot of work for you. But as a reader and a fan of comic books, it's very pleasing to have that kind of detail. Although after talking to you, and I assumed when I was reading, like, this must took forever to have this kind of detail. And then when I read that you did it all, I'm like, man, that's a lot of work. I feel like your process is very similar to how comics are done if you have 4 or 5 people working on it. So I don't feel like you're doing anything different. You're just doing it all by yourself, which is a lot of work.
Yeah, as far as the detail, the thing is also subject matter. And to me, Horus, when I picture the world, it's rich on different levels. So it's rich in the language, it's rich in the texture, it's rich in old books and the mysteries and so if I was doing a different kind of story, which I have some other ideas in my head, I can see different styles, so it's not like, but for me, this is how this world has to look. And I could potentially play around with, if he goes into a pocket universe, I could play around with a different style. But when it
Absolutely.
comes to Horus, all of the little details, the texture is part of the story.
Yeah, yeah. That's awesome. So where are we at as far as issue 3? It's not available yet, right?
It's not available. It
Okay.
is finished. The current Alterna campaign, which
Yep.
is the spring, it's not on that. And then in the summer is the King Cryptid. So I believe issue 3 will be on the fall.
Okay.
That might change depending on some things. So I
Yeah, yeah.
started issue 4 just a few days ago. So I'm just going to
Gotcha.
continue getting the
Yeah.
issues done, and then we'll see where they fit in the schedule with Alterna.
That's awesome. Yeah.
The other thing too is I'm trying to produce artwork, like ancillary artwork,
Okay.
to share. Because to
Yeah.
me, having you might have to wait 5 to 6 months to get an issue. I like
Yeah.
to do other sorts of illustrations and artwork that add to the
Yeah.
story, or potentially. I
Yeah.
just finished a drawing that I posted on Twitter, which I'll be posting the finished colors. And again, it's Horace in his study, and
Hmm.
you could spend a lot of time looking at the detail. And I don't, again, it's not arbitrary stuff. There's a lot of Easter eggs in there, and if so I'm trying to, with in between issues, to like add to the story and as
Yeah.
much as I can.
Yeah, yeah. That's awesome. That's awesome. So how long have you had this story? And how far out is the story already done in your head, or do you already have it written? Like, are you already on that next arc that you were talking about after this 5-part series from a story standpoint?
Issue 4 is written, issue 5 is outlined,
Hmm.
but they're pretty much done sort of in my head,
Right, yeah.
as far as the stories and the characters and what I'll be achieving in those stories.
Hmm.
The ongoing, I just have it outlined, and I have some pivotal scenes, and that's kind of how I'm trying to figure out that.
Yeah,
I actually don't want to think too far ahead, because that actually can be a problem.
sure. Yeah.
If I'm so excited about issue 4 and the ongoing, and I'm working on issue 5 in the miniseries, it
Yeah.
just, like, the excitement isn't there. So I like to have an idea of where I'm going, because I want to
Mhm.
know where I'm going. I don't want to write myself into a corner
Right.
or just drop the ball and not have an ending to something. So I want to make sure I know all of the answers to
Yeah.
everything, but I don't want to get too far ahead, because sitting down and doing concept art for an issue is a lot of fun as a creator. So the best thing to do really is have that nugget of an idea,
Right.
create the concept art, and then immediately go into drawing it, because it's all fresh. It's
Yeah.
like the energy is there. So that's what I try to do. I'm not saying that's the right thing to do,
No,
but
I
that's
mean,
my approach.
yeah, I think it's different by creator when it comes to pacing as far as issues and stuff. Unless you're working for a company where you have to have a monthly, then they're working, 4, 5 issues out, right? But at Alterna, right, there is that ability to, it seems to be to take your time and to launch during one of those, seasonal events on the Indiegogo. So it seems to work out, and you're at the perfect place for the type of comic that you're doing, which I love Alterna. I got so many Alterna comics. I love the simplicity. I love the paper that's being used. It brings back a lot of that 80s feel to it. And obviously the price point. How do you beat that price point? To have that kind of quality at that price point is ridiculous to me.
Yeah, it's been, when I finished the first issue, I sort of, I hadn't considered publishers or anything like that, because I wanted to focus on finishing it. And I knew if I thought too far ahead, I would never get there. So I'm like, you know what,
Yeah.
I'm going to make the comic that I want to make, and then I'll look at publishers. And I hadn't looked at publishers in a while. And this was 2019, and we'll see who's out there. And I kind of went down this list. I'm like, oh, let me check Alterna. And then I read that they were doing newsprint. I'm like, that's all I needed to hear. I mean, they have great titles, but that was the first thing that perked my ears. I'm like, newsprint? To
Yeah.
have my book on newsprint would be a dream come true. And then I ordered some books and I read it. And like you said, the priority really is on quality.
Yeah.
And we want to make the best books we can. We can't potentially do monthly books,
Yeah.
but we we just want to, the focus and the priority is on quality, and Pete's really great about letting us do that.
Hmm. Yeah, yeah. No, he's been amazing. We've had him on the show. I love everything that's happened with Alterna, and I'm just a big fan. So I'm glad that I was able to read Horace Hoover because it is a fun read.
Thank you.
So yeah, I mean, it's been very enjoyable. If anybody's out there and hasn't read it yet, you're making a mistake. Maybe you didn't know, but get to alternacomics.com. But also, they could follow you. I think it's right here, hhoover.com, if I'm not
Yep.
mistaken.
Yep.
Right here on this. And there's all kinds of cool stuff. So I was on your website, and there's links to your YouTube page, your Instagram and Twitter page. There's links to interviews that you've done.
Yeah.
Obviously, if somebody wants a Hoover t-shirt and hat, there's all that kind of cool stuff there too. But yeah, I mean, I really enjoyed kind of digging. And like I said, your YouTube page, if there's a person out there that's thinking about creating their own comic book, there's a lot of really good content that you put out there, Fabrizio, that really kind of walks through at least your process. If someone has that kind of a talent where they can do all 5 things at once.
Thank you. Yeah, I appreciate that. I'm trying to push the YouTube channel because after doing the books, you can't help but realize, okay, this is how I approached it. It might help somebody, so I might as well let them know.
Yeah, no, I think it's very, very good. I mean, I've dabbled in art. I love drawing. I don't have that skill set to be able to do panels and the different expressions of the same character. I could take a character and draw it, but it's another level when you're getting their facial expressions right, making sure that the head doesn't look weird on the body, that type of stuff, the anatomy. So I fail at that, but I can certainly copy somebody else's work and make it look decent enough to get by, but never for a comic book. So I'm always just amazed when I meet someone who has that kind of skill set. It's incredible because it is rare. And that's why there's a lot of creators out there that have amazing stories, but they usually have an artist that helps them out because it's a different skill set for sure.
Yeah, it's pretty unique, and it took me a while to get around to it.
Yeah,
But all those other things helped,
yeah,
my illustration, pen and ink stuff, the charcoal drawings, the anatomy studies, all of that stuff sort of came back and helped me create this, which it was good to know, that wasn't wasted time doing X, Y, or Z.
for sure, for sure. I mean, we could definitely see it in your artwork and your storytelling. What else is going on with you, Fabrizio? Right, we have this comic book. Are you doing anything else outside of the comic book that fans could follow you and watch you do? I know you mentioned YouTube. I know you're doing some art. Do you do commissions as well, or not right now?
I don't do commissions.
Mhm.
I do. I mean, there's the comic book, and most things are going to be Horace H. Hoover related.
Yep.
I do 3D sculpting, so I'm going to do a little bit more of that, maybe on the side in between books.
Yeah,
I don't do commissions just because I don't have time.
for sure. Yeah.
But I do the Alterna art auctions.
Oh, okay.
So I do
Yeah.
sketch cards. That's kind of like as far as I go. It's doable. They're
Yeah.
small, so they're affordable for people.
Yeah.
I really enjoy doing the sketch cards. The sketch cards help draw the comic book. You
Yeah.
get used to drawing small things, and then that really helps. So I look at it as all feeding into the same beast.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah. I think there was
yeah,
one last night. And Frankie B was on there doing sketch cards, an Alterna
Saturday.
auction. Oh, is it
Yep,
Saturday?
Saturday. Yep.
Wow, I was way off.
Yeah, that was a good time. I actually I had a resin model kit prototype
Oh, wow.
that I was able to auction off, which was a lot of fun. So I'm having
Nice.
a model done for that. So a little 5-inch Horus H. Hoover that people will
That's
be
so
able to
cool.
buy eventually.
That's so cool. How long does it take you to do a sculptor like that?
It depends on the actual model.
Yeah.
For this one, I wanted to keep it a little simple because the smaller you get, you can't have like fragile little pieces off of it. So it's a little easier. It doesn't take a ton of time, maybe a week. a
Okay.
week.
Yeah.
And so I'll be doing those, like I said, maybe in between issues, on and off, for Horace H. Hoover, and maybe for some other titles at Alterna, which would be really interesting.
Well, that'd be really cool.
yeah, so look for YouTube on that. That'll be kind of fun.
Yeah, yeah, that's so awesome. So let's kind of walk through how people could follow you. On Twitter, it's just first and last name, correct?
It's at Fabrizio Artist.
Okay, at Fabrizio Artist. And then Instagram, if I'm not mistaken, it's Fabrizio dot Aiello dot art. Is that
Yep.
correct? Okay,
Yep,
perfect.
that's right.
So we'll put those in the comments too, because I think people should follow you. And then on YouTube, it's just first and last name, right?
Yeah, if you search Fabrizio Aiello, it'll come up. It's
It'll
at
come up.
Unhallowed Art, but
Unhallowed Art.
yep.
Okay, very good. That's awesome. Because yeah, that is a real fun page to watch you in
Thank you.
action. Yeah, yeah, a lot of fun. Anything else that we're missing, Fabrizio? I know you said possibly the fall, as far as the Indiegogo campaign that Alterna does for everybody under the Alterna label, right? Whatever's available at that time.
Yep.
That's when you want to get in on those Indiegogos. And there's always a lot of fun additions. Usually it's their trading card line. They'll put 2 or 3 of those in there of the comics
Yep.
that are part of that campaign. So we should be looking hopefully in the fall, possibly for issue 3, correct?
Yep. Yep. And I'll plan on posting a lot of like intermediary stuff, so things that'll feed into the story. So if you liked issue 1, go to my Twitter, you might see something in there that you get more of the story slowly.
Yeah.
That way it's not completely, dead in the water for 6 months.
Right.
Yeah. So check me out on Twitter and Instagram. I'll be posting a lot of fun stuff with Horus and all the other characters, some artwork that you'll see later on. I post, in progress stuff. So thanks for having me. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, absolutely. And some of your art you could purchase off your website, if I'm not mistaken, right? Some of the panels that you've done.
There's a couple of prints.
Oh, a couple of prints.
They're
Yeah.
prints. Yeah.
Gotcha. Yeah. Yeah.
Yep.
So that's pretty cool. Signed and everything, ready to go.
They're not signed, but if somebody's interested in that, I would love to do that. Right now, I'm just using a service that essentially prints it out and frames it. But I will be posting more stuff on the store. So if people are interested, they can sign up to my newsletter and they'll get, updates on YouTube videos, things in the store, artwork, all of the above.
That's so cool. And then obviously you could go to Alterna and purchase issues 1 and 2, I believe, are available, right?
Yes, 1 is available to order, 2 is on demand. And
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Very good. Well, I can't tell you how much I appreciate meeting you. It's been a lot of fun, Fabrizio. You made me a fan of your comic book. So I appreciate that too. I can't wait for issue 3. I powered through the first 2 issues very quickly. I was like, wow, this is a lot. This is amazing, man. And then obviously enthralled by your art. But the story is so awesome. The time frame in which the story takes place in the 20s is a lot of fun as well. To your point, the language that he uses allows you to kind of enter into that time frame. I'm gonna have to have a dictionary next to me on a couple of the words, to be quite honest. But it's a lot of fun. I love the side. I don't know if you call them sidekicks, but his 2 friends that are helping him were awesome. I certainly love Slurp, and I got to dig in to figure out what font you use, so that way I could go and dig out what he's saying, because he says a lot, to be quite honest.
He does say some stuff.
Yeah, it's almost like watching Groot, right? And Guardians of the Galaxy. Everyone seems to know what Groot's saying except for the audience. So at least you put it out there for us to kind of figure out.
Yeah, exactly. Thank you. I appreciate that. Yeah, it's funny. Slurp seems to be a bit of a favorite, which I wasn't expecting, but
sometimes it works out. And then was it Max was the other guy?
Max. Yeah.
Yeah, Max is pretty cool too, right? He looks like he could be a brute if he wanted to. He's definitely a very stocky individual. But yeah, Slurp, I think it's the unknown about him that probably is causing that. Same with Horus, right? There's so much we don't know about him, but he's so vocal. We kind of are starting to grow an attachment to him. But Slurp is just out there, man. We know he's there. We don't know what he's saying. So I think it forces you to want to dig in more, and that might be a little bit of driving that.
Yeah, that makes me happy, because I like the idea of, Horus is a detective. He's solving mysteries. So as the reader, I want to be as sort of mysterious, not just to leave things unsaid, but yeah, like there are things to figure out along with Horus. So I'm glad to hear that.
Yeah, sometimes the unknown is a great driver of the story, though. So I don't think there's anything wrong with that, Fabrizio. I think
Yeah, for sure.
that creates some of that, awe, like, I gotta
Yeah,
figure
sometimes
this
we
part
get
out.
handed things a little too easily now,
For
so
sure.
it's nice to obscure things a little bit.
Make the audience work for it a little bit. I think that's a lot
Yeah,
of fun.
yeah, for sure.
Well, Fabrizio, thank you so much. I really enjoyed our time together. Would love to do it again as we get closer to the Indiegogo. I know we were talking with Pete to do something just to get the message out there for all the different campaigns. I mean, if you love comic books, and you love great stories with amazing art, here's an example from Alterna of some amazing stuff. And the price point is right. You could get a lot of bang for your buck. And that's what I found out very quickly by becoming an Alterna fan. So I appreciate you, Fabrizio, for coming on. And if there's anything we could ever do for you, please let us know. We'll put your information in the comment section once this post. And yeah, thank you, my friend.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, yeah. Well, have a great rest of your week, and we'll talk soon.
Thank you.
All right, bye-bye.
Bye.